The eyes of the world are on Georgia, where police are facing criticism for the use of water cannon, tear gas, stun grenades and rubber bullets against protesters. Don't forget, of course, their fellow Georgian citizens. They're protesting against a controversial law. The Foreign Agents Bill is violently dividing people, both in Parliament and on the streets. The standoff is part of a wider struggle that could determine whether Georgia, a country of 3.7 million people that has seen turmoil, war and revolution since the collapse of the Soviet Union, moves closer towards Europe or back under Moscow's influence. Those for say it's needed to make sure the funding of NGOs is transparent. That means no foreign influence. That's what those for are saying. But those against say the law smacks of Moscow's influence and represents a throwback to repressive times. It could also derail Georgia's ambition to enter the EU. The EU bid, of course, enshrined in Georgia's constitution. 80% of people are said to be very much in support of that. But on the streets and in Parliament, as these images are showing, angry scenes and increasingly more violence. We welcome to the programme Salomé Zourabichvili, the President of Georgia. Madam President, thank you very much for joining us here on France 24.
Good evening.
Can you explain for us, for those who don't yet know, what your position is on this controversial bill?
Well, I think that we are, in a way, beyond the controversial bill, which is a duplicate of what President Putin has been doing in Russia over the past years in order to suppress the civil society, the non-governmental organizations, and the introduction for the second time of a law that copies the Russian law. That's why it's called here the Russian law, is really a provocation to the civil society that, if you remember, last year in March, protested this law and won. The law was retrieved and Georgia finally got its candidate status to the European Union. Now this reintroduction of the same law is felt by the Georgian population and by the civil organizations and the NGOs and the media as a real attempt before the elections that are to take place in October, as an attempt to really suppress critical voices. But the most concern today is even not so much the Russian law as the Russian government, because the declarations, the statement that we heard just 2 days ago from the honorary president of the Georgian Dream, the ruling party, Mr. Ivanishvili, is a declaration of war to our partners, to the United States and to the European Union, calling them all party of war, calling them all agents, calling me an agent of the party of war, and calling all the organizations and all the parties in Georgia and this youth that is out on the streets and claiming that they want to preserve their European future, calling us all agents of revolution and of subversion. That's exactly the terms that President Putin has been using against its own civil society.
Madam President, if this bill goes to its third reading and passes into law, what will happen? Do you feel that the violence could get worse? Is Georgia on the brink of an instability which could go towards some kind of civil conflict?
I don't think that it's instability. I think that the young people that are coming out to defend their European future are very reasonable and very conscious of the fact that a country that has 2 occupied territories by Russia cannot play instability. So they're just protesting very peacefully. There are some provocations from the forces of police or special forces, but I'm sure that we will restrain, because the way is long until the elections, and the real end to this Russian law and to many other laws that have been passed in the recent weeks or months, the answer is in the voting at the time of the elections in October. So the aim and the objective is very clear. It's to keep Georgia in line with its European future, with what is written in the Constitution of Georgia, that European integration is an obligation for all the institutions of Georgia to work towards. And that is something that the Georgian population understands very well and is going to defend very well.
Madam President, you mentioned Bidzina Ivanishvili, the honorary president of the Georgian Dream Party, the party that's been in charge of the country for 12 years. You mentioned his influence. Also, you mentioned the two regions of Georgia occupied by Russia since 2008, Abkhazia, South Ossetia. Is Russia in a position, do you think, somehow to exploit this situation, perhaps steal more Georgian territory?
I don't think that's a play that we have now witnessing. I think that Russia is seeing that the European path of Georgia is something very real, that together with Russia there is Armenia that is taking the same path, that Azerbaijan is leaning towards partnership with Turkey, and that the Caucasus and the Black Sea is somehow going out of the influence of Russia. So yes, it's an attempt by Russia when this European path is becoming very immediate and very real to try to put its leverage on the evolution of the situation through, obviously now, the ruling party, Georgian Dream, and its honorary president that are playing in the hands of Russian policy. And that is what is not acceptable for a country that has gone through more than 2 centuries of different attempts by Russia to impose its law and its imperialism on Georgia. Georgia has reclaimed its independence twice and will preserve it this time also.
Madam President, is the fear that Georgian Dream, the party in charge for the past 12 years, is actually trying to push the country towards Moscow? Is that how you interpret things?
For a long time, there were question marks also outside of the country and here in the latest period. There were question marks of why was not the Georgian Dream taking more direct and clear measures to favor the integration to the European Union. Why was Georgian Dream not implementing the 12 recommendations as it was asked by the European Union, or now the 9 recommendations? Was it to keep power and only to keep power, or was it under some form of influence of Russia? After the speech of an honorary President Ivanishvili 2 days ago, it is very clear that it's a declaration anti-Western, anti-European. Everybody has to read that speech, and that makes clear what Mr. Ivanishvili and his ruling party are trying to do to Georgia. And that is unacceptable to the Georgian population. It's also unacceptable to the Georgian president.
Madam President, we're out of time, but I've got to ask you another question. You've mentioned that the elections are coming up. You've mentioned that it is up to the Georgian people and their voice will be the one that carries. And you said that the majority are for going into Europe. However, the situation as it stands looks like the ruling party might be taking a move in the other direction. Is there anything that the EU could do to help, to intervene, to perhaps ease the situation, do you think?
I think that what is waited from the European Union is very clear attention. It's understandable that we are at a time when there are many global crises, and I know that you're covering all of that, and that Georgia is not necessarily in the center of attention, but as a candidate country to the European Union, as one that is on the verge of getting to these negotiations of adhesion, and as one of the countries that are really enthusiasts of the European Union, I'm talking about the population, we need the attention and we need clarity from the European Union, that they understand that the population wants the EU, and maybe that's the governing forces today are not doing all the necessary for that. So this clarity of the messages is what we need. The rest is to be done by us.
Madam President, thank you for joining us here in France 24. As you were speaking to us, we're showing images live from Tbilisi, where, of course, the situation remains unsettled, to say the least. But thank you for sharing your analysis with us and for giving us your time. We appreciate it very much. President of Georgia, Salomé Zourabichvili, joining us live here on France 24. Thank you, Madam President, once again. That concludes this apropos segment looking at the situation in Georgia. We continue, of course, to monitor for all developments. For more news, stay with us. Short break, then it's Eye on Africa.